Howdy folks, Little John, and time for it's not actually a 5 on Friday, it's going to come out on Friday, but it's actually Thursday afternoon, just home from work. I'm planning a pretty big day tomorrow of other stuff outside the brewery, so I don't know if I'll actually get a chance to sit down tomorrow and do a vid. So, thought I'd have a crack at it. Savo whilst having a beer to finish off the week, and so what I want to have a bit of a chat about today is how much yeast you should be pitching on your beer. It's a common question. People are always asking how much yeast should I use. Quite often, especially when brewers are starting out, they're using kit yeast. Is the 1 pack of kit yeast enough? And you get all sorts of answers to the question. Quite often you will get the answer that no, you buy a better pack of yeast than the kit yeast because there's not enough in there, which is true. There's not enough yeast in the kit yeast, but unfortunately quite often the go-to answer is that you only need 1 pack of yeast, unless you're getting into a high gravity beer. And you see quite often thrown around like 1050 seems to be the magical number. At the starting gravity of 1050, we'll go, oh, if you go above that you need 2 packs of yeast. Below that, don't worry about it. So you get this running around everywhere. It's a very generic and very rounded sort of a number. If you buy this gravity, just go 1 pack. If you're above, go 2 packets. With no sort of variance or anything in between. And yeah, it does make life a little bit easier. You just go 1 packet or 2 packets, but it's far more in depth than that. And if you want to be making the best beer that you can, then you really need to be looking at it a little bit more closely. Now, I've done videos in the past on the 2 versus 1 argument and the difference that it makes, and that's solely based around the idea of pitching the right amount of yeast on your beer. That wasn't specifically that 2 packs of yeast versus 1 pack is going to be better, because in every beer that's not going to be the case. And I've explained that that's on a certain beer in a certain range for that to work. That range is generally bang around the mark that your average beer sits, and I'll explain that shortly. So what I'm going to go through today is where the numbers come from and the sort of numbers you need to be pitching a good number into beers of varying gravities and various styles. Okay, so first thing, just background on where I get my numbers from. Now there are different places where you can get numbers, and I refer plenty to the Brewer's Friend yeast pitch rate calculator, and I use it pretty much universally. A lot of people do see referred to Mr. Multi, and Mr. Multi was the first calculator that I was sent to, and was after playing with Mr. Multi on about 2, maybe 3 brews, and I started looking at that going, this just can't be right. And that's when I started looking into the research and the studies and where the numbers were actually coming from. And sort of decided for myself that Mr. Multi as a whole package, for me, seemed to be really dodgy. It did things that some others at the time didn't do very well, but I've since come to the point that I really couldn't recommend anybody to use Mr. Multi as a calculator. Its numbers are flawed and based on a lot of old, just simply the beliefs that people had about yeast. Wasn't really based on anything particularly scientific, and I don't think it's been updated over the years to make any sort of adjustments for that. So Brewer's Friend has looked at many studies that have been conducted over the years from several resources and several very well respected resources, including Chris White from White Labs, and also some independent studies, and the studies also done by yeast manufacturers such as Fermentus, Lallemond, SAF, I don't even know what their bloody full name is, but you know, the three of the major dry yeast companies, and looked at all their numbers and have used those to drive their calculator numbers. So those basic numbers work on that a dry pack yeast, and we're really only going to get into dry yeast. I'll touch on liquid, but mainly dry yeast. Their calculator works on a basis of a dry packet of yeast having 10 billion cells of yeast per gram. Now, the studies that they link and studies I've found will roughly support that as being an upper reach for most dry yeast, and with most dry yeast sitting somewhere around that sort of 6 to 10 billion cells mark. So that's the number. I'm happy to work with that. The yeast companies actually state generally 5 and 6 grams, 6 billion per gram as the numbers they're happy to say they've got. Which means that in plenty of tests they're hitting that low mark. Otherwise they'd have it higher. So where some people, like Mr. Malty as an example, work on the basis and want to throw around that dry yeast have 20 billion cells per gram. Now that's a fair stretch from manufacturers saying 6 and studies that are saying 8 to 10. So that's where I run my numbers. As I said, I make my recommendations off my own testing of the final beer product. I'm not a technician, I'm not a scientist, I don't have lab equipment. The closest I've got to a lab is a frigid piece of beer cold at a certain temperature, which allows me to drink it and taste it. My tasting has found that using these higher cell numbers based around these very assumptions gives you a better beer than going lower. So that's good enough for me. So that's what I'm working on. So going to just run through some simple numbers to give you an idea of what you're looking at. Now this will be listed in the comments, so don't worry too much about it getting a bit carried away. But so we're going to start off with just a basic ale. So you're knocking out your normal ale. Now it's a standard brew for most brewers is in the low to mid 1040s, that 1042 to 1046 range. Now that's a beer that knocks out in the mid 4%, 4.6, up to 5% in the bottle sort of thing. So standard sort of beers. So at that 1046 gravity, that 4.6% alcohol beer, standard, bog standard, run-of-the-mill, commercial sort of beer, you're looking at a minimum of 197 billion cells for a 23 litre batch. Now, that's your 2 packets. That's a single packet, is it? Like I said, 10 billion cells, 110 grams of this 11 gram packet. 110, so your 2 packets, 220. So you're in that ballpark. Again, that floats right back to around that 1 gram per litre sort of rule I throw around. And I said, and that's always thrown on the basis of an average beer in an average batch. And that's what I talk about, that average beer, that 1.45, 1.46 beer, 23 litres, that's what you get. Now, if you're dropping your gravity down lower, so you're making a lower gravity beer, then of course you're going to need less yeast. But still, even at 1038 starting gravity, so a beer that's going to finish somewhere in the, the high 3% mark, that 3.7, 3.8%, pushing into the very low 4s with priming. So, you know, leaning into your mid-strengths. You're still looking at 150 to 160 billion cells to brew that effectively. That's the recommendation. That's close enough to 1.5 packets. So even on those lower beers, 1 packet is pitching short. Yeah, and we know that pitching short affects your flavours. It throws off esters, it throws off, you know, phenols. It gives you flavours you don't want, and it doesn't leave your beer as clean as it should be. So you'd have to be making a fairly light beer, and you'd be talking a light beer. You'd be talking a beer in the 2%, like in the 2.5% range, to actually warrant only pitching 1 packet of dry yeast. Now if we come up the other way and start creeping up a little bit higher, and as I said, you get these, as I said, people are going, you get the 1050, start pitching 2 packs. Now, a beer at 1050, you're needing around 210 billion cells. Up to 250 or 260, if you want to follow the professional brewer's advice of pitching a little bit extra as your gravity sort of increases up and you're getting into that higher end. So that is getting onto the really pushing the boundary of 2 packets at that sort of level, so low 1050s. So at that point, that pitching 2 packs in that 1050 is starting to get a little closer to being reality. But then this is where you start pushing beyond that, and you've really got to start looking at, and even at that 1050 mark, you've got to be looking at the effect that the higher alcohol will have on your yeast. And as I said, this is why when you look at a calculator, it will give you an option to go into a next level, which is a higher gravity ale as opposed to just a normal gravity. At which point you jump up about 30% on your actual required yeast. So at that point you start getting up, I was at a 1054, you work on that, you're getting up around the 300 billion cells. So you're sneaking up towards that 3 packets at that range. So and that keeps growing and growing and growing. 1062, you're looking, that's a 6.1% beer. As home brewers, that's not bloody uncommon. Plenty of IPAs and stouts, and we're knocking out in those well beyond the 6% mark, in the mid to high 6s and 7%. And you're looking at 260, 300, 350 billion cells and increasing. So if you're pitching 2 billion cells, you're struggling. And people say, oh, it's a big beer, you're doing an IPA, it's got lots of hops, you're not going to notice it. It's a big stout, it's got bloody lots of other flavours going on, you're not going to notice it. You might not be able to specifically pick what the yeast is doing, but it's all part of the big picture. I don't know many people who can pick out the crystal malt as opposed to the chocolate, as opposed to like a Cara Munich in a stout. But they're all playing their part, and without them it's not going to be the same. So you've got to take those numbers into account. What I've found, and I find a lot of this, if you aren't pitching enough yeast, the yeast, as part of its stress and having to work harder, strips your beer of body. It starts looking for anything it can to keep itself alive and healthy and active. And it starts ripping things out of your beer that you want left in the beer. Okay? So not pitching a healthy amount of yeast will not help you get to the final beer you're looking for. You'll produce a certain kind of beer to have a certain finish, and then by not pitching enough yeast, you're not allowing that beer to get where it wants to. So it's really important that you are pitching the right amounts. Now, this is ales. lagers. And I've sat down, I've run all the numbers, and it's fairly standard. For lager, pitching and brewing at lager temps, which is sort of, you know, realistically 4 to 12 degrees, you need twice as many cells as you do for an ale at the same gravity. So your 1046 ale, it needs 197 billion cells, will need 398. Well, it says 395. That's it, 395. Double the amount, and that's right through the range. And this is what plenty of people don't make lagers, because they don't want to pay for the yeast, because it's significant. You're talking well enough close to 4 packs of dry yeast on a 1046 lager. Now, so that's more yeast. It's yeast that's more expensive on top of it. Yeah, you pay generally about $2 a packet more for lager yeast than you do for your, say, a USA 5 or an SA4 or something like that. So it's quite often $6 or $7 a packet. So for 3 or 4 packets, you're talking $28. That's a significant amount of money on a brew for a lot of brewers, which is why people do starters. It's why people rinse yeast. It's why they do all these other things to avoid having to pitch these bulk amounts of packets. There's videos on starters. There's videos on washing yeast. They're all there. If I remember, I'll link them up. If not, jump on the page and have a look. They're all there. And it's all processes any brewer can do, and it will get you the right amount of yeast in every beer, whether it's an ale or a lager, whether it's 1042 or whether it's 1074. Get yourself the right amount of yeast, and you're going to do right. And it's no different if you're if you're using liquid yeast. It's the same thing. You've still got to work on your numbers, and you really need to be working your calculators then, because your liquid yeast loses viability very easily. 3% a day, just as a quick example. A 30-day-old pack of liquid yeast, whether it be White Labs, Yeast, Imperial, doesn't matter, whatever it is, will lose about 3% of its viability every day. So 31 days after it's been manufactured, you've only got 78% viability. So on a single pack, that's 78% for a White Labs or a Yeast. 78 billion cells, it's about 156 on an Imperial, which has got a higher starting cell. But anyway, it's a significant drop, and given that these yeast come in from America, you don't often get them anything under 30 days old. So you've got to be aware of that and use that in your calculations to make your starters to build up the right amount of cells. There's a lot of belief that pitching liquid yeast is better and it's got more cells and it's going to do the job. No, it's not that simple. Liquid yeast is good. Liquid yeast better? Not necessarily. Again, there's another video about that. It's a different kind of yeast that will give a different character in different beers, in different situations. It's just another option. It's a good option. It opens up your variety of beers that you can work with. But it's no different to dry yeast when it comes to having your numbers. You've got to work it out and make sure you're taking steps to get the right amount. Okay? Don't let anyone tell you that you shouldn't make a starter with dry yeast, just buy more packets. If you want to make a starter with dry yeast, go for your fucking life. Is it a little bit pointless to make a starter with USA 5 when you could just pitch 2 packets? Yeah, probably. You're going to spend a couple of dollars on malt and time and all the rest of it, but yeah, it's all part of the hobby. It's all part of doing what we're doing. So if you want to do it, do it. Don't let anyone tell you not to. If you want to do it and you've got the time and it's not going to kill you, go for it. People tell you washing USA 5 is a waste of time, or dry yeast because it's cheap, it's a waste of time. Fucking listen to them. Do it if you want. Yeah, it's your beer, it's your hobby. do what you want. And as with these cell numbers, you know, you don't need to take my word for it. You don't need to follow my advice. Go along and do whatever it is you want to do. I can only suggest to you, as I said, that from my experience and my testing, my tasting, that a good quality amount of yeast produces a better beer than a lower quantity of yeast. So make that decision for yourself. As I said, I'll put the numbers down the bottom. So if you want a bit of a closer look, take a note of it, you can do so. That'll make it an easy way to pick up your numbers without having to go and use a calculator. I know some guys are a little bit iffy on how they are and do they work and how to put the right numbers in, and then don't trust themselves to get it right. So I'll give you simple numbers for the cover of most beers you're going to make down the bottom, so you can use them if you want. That's it. But as always, you know, if you've got any questions, stick them down the bottom. If you're not sure about something, ask the question. Okay. If you're slightly in doubt, if you're not sure that using the extra yeast is really going to be worth it, and you don't think you're going to get any great benefit out of it, I say to you, try it on one brew. Try it once. Pitch a second pack of dry yeast on a beer you'd normally only pitch one packet on. If you're only normally using kit yeast, get rid of it. Throw on some proper dry, good quality dry yeast. Talk to your local home brew shop. Ask the question down the bottom. Get on a forum or a Facebook page and ask someone what yeast they recommend for the kind of beer you're making, so you can get the right yeast. Your beer will be better for it, and that's what it's all about. Making the best beer you can every time, without spending a lot of money and without going a lot of trouble. Okay. If you haven't subscribed to Little John, hit the button down there in the corner. Come along for the ride. This is what we're all about. Improving beer, making it better, making your life easier. So that's me, Little John, for today. Enjoying my loaded dog lager. Videos there on this. It's going down quite nicely. Even this bottle, which was primed with white sugar, which is the least of my preferred options with this beer. But anyway, till I see you again, we're brewing beer, we're talking beer, we're drinking beer, good brewing.